Hi everybody, my name is Gemma. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a Just Like Us ambassador. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's masterclass talk with Asifa Lahore. Today, Asifa is going to be discussing the question, how do I figure out who I am? And I'm so excited to hear what she has to say. She has lived such an amazing, interesting life. After Asifa's talk, we're also going to be having a Q&A. This questions that have been submitted have all come from pupils, but they're being read out by some of our other Just Like Us ambassadors. I hope everybody watching this video back is having a great School Diversity Week. School Diversity Week is a yearly event run by Just Like Us, celebrating LGBT plus equality in education. Last year, we had around 2 million pupils get involved, over thousands of schools in the UK, and we're so glad that we could be back for 2021. If you want to get involved with or interact with any of the masterclasses that Just Like Us have made for School Diversity Week, there will be a link and a comment made here and at the end of the session talking about how you can safely and anonymously do that if you need to. Only thing left to do now is to introduce Asifa herself. Asifa is Britain's first out Muslim drag queen. She has been a part of BBC, she's spoken to BBC News and other media outlets worldwide about her experiences being both LGBT plus and Asian. She has been part of the Channel 4 documentary Muslim Drag Queens, and which was watched by over 1 million people. She's created her own nights for LGBT plus Asian people, and she has been a massive advocate for the disability community. So without further ado, Asifa, thank you very much. You're on screen now.
Thank you very much, Gemma, for that lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Asifa Lahore. I use she and her pronouns, and I just want to start by saying Happy School Diversity Week. It's so great to be doing this masterclass with you, and I hope you get everything that you need out of it. I'm just grateful to have you all here today, and I will be speaking on the subject of figuring out who I am. So, who am I? My name is Asifa Lahore. I'm best known as Britain's first out Muslim drag queen, and I am an award-winning activist. I've used my 10-year career so far to really raise visibility of not only who I am, but also the communities that I belong to, and also the intersectionality that I live my life as. I belong to so many different subcultures, so many different identities, so many different communities, and I'll be talking about that later on in the masterclass as well, and getting you to think about where you belong as well. So from this masterclass, what I want you to take away essentially is three things. I want you to take away three objectives, okay? The first one is beginning the negotiation with yourself about who you are, where you belong, and also where you want to go. It's really important in life to have a destination or a goal to go towards, and that's part of this masterclass, and I hope you take that away. The second objective is breaking down the barriers of labels and the notion of pressure, the pressure that we get from ourselves, the pressure that society puts on us, and also peer pressure. I know a lot of people watching right now are, between 14 and 16, and those ages, like, you probably have started your GCSE courses. Some of you are probably thinking about what subjects to do, where you want to go after your GCSEs. Do you want to go college? Do you even want to go university after college? Do you want to do an apprenticeship? There's all these questions. There's all this pressure that a lot of young people feel. I mean, I certainly did when I was at school. Do I want to take drama? Do I want to take music? Do I want to do what my parents want me to do, which is, go down the medical route? So the second objective that I want you to take away is breaking down those barriers of labels and pressure, the emotional pressure. Lastly, what I want you to take away from this is building the confidence to be yourself in every situation, in every environment, and being the best authentic you that is possible, and letting the world have you. Allow yourself to be the most self-expressed version of yourself you can. Now you're probably going to think, God, how can I get this from this masterclass? All I'll say is be open-minded and allow yourself to ask these questions without any judgment, without any pressure, because a lot of it comes from ourselves, but just allow yourselves for the next 20 minutes or so just to be open-minded and ask these questions. Okay? So the idea of who I am, or as I like to call it, intersectionality. What do we know about intersectionality already? I think the world is at the moment, especially as a young person, there's a lot of pressure to fit a certain label, whether that's being a girl, being a boy, being part of the LGBT community or not, being a person of faith. I think there's a lot of pressure to either fit one label and not another, or if you fit a lot of labels, is how to negotiate being part of all those communities or all those identities that you belong to or you feel you belong to. Sometimes the communities or identities that you belong to or associate with may have a lot of friction together. Some of them may sit really easily together. For example, something really light and easy. Being a boy, you're expected to like the color blue and not the color pink. But what if you're a boy who likes the color pink? A lot of pressure, a lot of guys feel a lot of pressure to like blue or feel like they need to like blue because it's a masculine color and pink is a female color. So I'm just going to let that notion just sit with you for a second, just so that you can think about it. Now, that's the idea of intersectionality, is allowing yourself to sit with who you are and allowing yourself to open up each identity and sit with that. Now, let me tell you how I did that in my life. This year, in 2021, I am turning 38. This is what 38 looks like. When I was 14, 15, 16, trust me, I never thought that I would get to 38. I thought, God, 38 is ancient, like it's old, it's like next level. But here I am, 38, and the way I thought my life would turn out when I was, a teenager at school, I never thought I would be doing drag. I never thought I'd be even delivering a masterclass like this. And the way I've got that confidence is by allowing all of my identities to sit together and be reconciled and not reject one for the other. Now, that hasn't come easily. So I belong to all these communities. I'm British, I'm South Asian, and within that I'm Pakistani, Muslim, I'm queer, I'm transgender, and I'm also disabled. So I'm severely sighted and I'm on the blind spectrum. So that's where my disability sits. Now, when I was a teenager, I found life really, really difficult. When I was 11, I was diagnosed with this eye condition and I was told, you're going to go blind by the time you're 25. And as a young person, as an 11-year-old, you kind of don't know what to do with that because you're 11, your body's changing, your environment's changing. That year I went from primary school to secondary school. And I kind of, as a young person, I still had a really good eyesight. And the way my disability works is the older I get, the more sight I lose. So I kind of didn't own the fact that I was disabled because it didn't show. No one knew that I was disabled. I could read and write really well. I could see really well. I could go about my daily business. So I didn't worry about it. What I did worry about when I was a teenager was the fact that I was born male and I liked other guys. So I knew really early on that I liked other guys, and I knew, coming from a South Asian perspective and coming from a Pakistani and Muslim perspective, that that was going to be a problem. I finished reading the Quran at age 11, and I inherently knew that this was going to be an issue, and I kept it to myself. And it was only when I was 16 that my younger sister read my diary, and she was the first person in my family that I came out to. And she was 10 at the time. There's like a 6-year difference between me and my younger sister. And she told me, she said, don't tell mum and dad, they're not going to understand it. And she voiced the thoughts that I had in my head all those years that I kept quiet about, that, I don't think my community, mum and dad, are going to understand it, so I'm just going to keep it to myself. At school, I got super heavily bullied for being gay, and also for being brown as well. I was bullied and was a victim of homophobia and racism as well. And I found school really, really difficult. What I did was I put my head down and chose to do music and drama, and I auditioned for the Brit School to do my A levels, and I got a place there. And what got me through secondary school and the bullying was just putting my head down, getting through it. I couldn't go to my mum and dad and tell them why I was getting bullied because, coming from an ethnic minority, I wasn't ready to come out. And secondly, going back to mum and dad and saying, look, this is the reason why I'm getting bullied. As a child of an immigrant family, it's seen as, I'm bringing extra pressure into the family, I'm bringing extra shame into the family, and, being bullied for something like that, I was kind of afraid that maybe, my mum and dad would move me to Pakistan, for example, where I could get education there instead of the UK. So I kept quiet. When I got to the Brit School, it was the first time in my life that I was surrounded by, people that were really artsy, people that were really creative, and I met, gay and lesbian and bisexual people for the first time at the Brit School. And it was a place where I allowed myself to be expressed. And at the same time, because I didn't want to deal with all the pressures of being Muslim and being, from the LGBT community, I decided to diminish my Asianness and my Muslimness. So I wouldn't really talk about anything that was too Asian or anything that was too Muslim, because I was in a position where I could express my queerness. But that obviously came with its challenges, because I was living quite a double standard life where at home I would be the good South Asian Muslim Pakistani boy, and then when I was outside, all my friends knew me as this, really expressive, camp, young, gay guy, and my ethnicity and my religion culture had nothing to do with me. Those people knew me as just that one person. After the Brit School, I went to university. I went to Queen Mary University of London in East London, and it was the first time in my life that I was surrounded by the South Asian community. So Queen Mary University of London is in Mile End, in Tower Hamlets, which has a massive Bangladeshi and Pakistani community. And a lot of the students were Asian when I went to university. And believe it or not, it was the first time in my life that I was in an environment where I wasn't the ethnic minority, that I was part of the ethnic majority. Um, and, you know, in a world where we talk about privilege, that for me was the first time I experienced privilege, where I didn't have to, you know, explain my Asian ways or explain, you know, the Ramadan, or explain what it means to be a Muslim, because everyone around me was more or less from the same community. But again, I decided that I wasn't going to. I was going to be Asian. I was going to express my Asianness, but you know what? I'm going to keep my queerness hush hush, because it will cause a lot of problems here. Um, and you know, life changed for me, because at university I found I fell in love, and I um, met another Pakistani young man who I fell in love with, and ended up getting civil partnered with. And during that process, I came out to my parents. It got to a point in my life where I just couldn't. I hated, you know, going to different spaces and being different people, or going to going to university and diminishing my queerness, or you know, going out clubbing in the queer community, and diminishing my Asianness or my Muslimness. You know, it's really interesting. My first few times going to clubbing, for example, I would have discussions on the dance floor about why, you know, why I identified as Muslim and gay, for example. And I would just be like, I'm just here to dance. I'm just here to have a good night with my friends. I don't want to, you know, deal with all this pressure and all this hot air. So when I finally did come out, I was 22, and it was difficult. It was difficult explaining to my mum and dad about, you know, being gay, about being queer, and you know, the words, my mum and dad speak Urdu and and it was hard explaining that in my mother languages, because words, you know, the words like lesbian, gays, bisexual just do not exist. And I remember my mum and dad sort of asking me about, you know, whether this means that I wanted to be a girl. And at the time, I was very happy being gay, and I was like, no, this is who I am. And you know, there was a lot of turbulence at that time in my life. I fell into like a deep depression. I was taken to my doctor. I was taken to my imam. And for those of you that really want to know about my coming out story, you can research it online. It's very you know, heavily documented. So I won't go into too much detail about it. But what I will say is, that time of turbulence, I realized that, okay, I can either choose to live a life of absolute authenticity, where I can be myself everywhere and not feel I need to apologize for being myself in different circumstances and different spaces, or I can go the other way. And, you know, the other option for me at the time was entering into an engagement and a marriage with my first female cousin in Pakistan. Um, but I chose to come out. I chose to really reject that, the arranged marriage, and I chose to instead marry my boyfriend. And I want to fast forward a little bit. I want to fast forward to the civil partnership ceremony. My mum ended up coming along to it, which was a big deal, because my parents were like totally against it. And the more and more my marriage went along, the more and more my parents eventually came round. I think there was a period where, my mum and dad were happy that I was happy as long as I kept quiet about it. As in, a lot of the community, my Pakistani and Muslim community, did not know about it. I was happy for a little while, but then I decided to do drag, and everything changed. I didn't follow a career in performing arts when I was younger, post Brit school, because I was scared of coming out. I was scared of the world knowing who I was if I were to follow a career in the performing arts. So fast forward to a time where I'm happy. I've got my gorgeous husband, my mum and dad are cool. Things seem to be falling into place. I decided to do drag. Now, when I did drag, I entered a competition, a national competition called Drag Idol, and all hell broke loose because I decided to wear a rainbow colored burqa, and I decided to do parodies and comedies, very much like other drag queens were doing in cabaret at the time. And it really divided the audience, right? I don't know about you guys, if you're going to enter a competition, you want to win. I came third overall nationally, but I divided opinions because some people were like, oh my gosh, she's so original. She's bringing her culture. She's bringing, she's bringing all these parodies. Everything is very new, fresh. We love it. And on the other hand, you had people going, oh, well, this is really offensive. Isn't it offensive to the LGBT community? Isn't it offensive to Muslims? And I found myself arguing with judging panels, with audiences that, look, this is my experience. This is how I've lived my life. And I refuse to pigeonhole myself. I refuse to, oh, sorry, that's my straw. I refuse to reject parts of myself for different people. This is who I am. This is where I come from. This is what I believe. And it's okay. And, I'm not saying that people need to agree with me. I'm just saying this is who I am. And this is how I want to present myself. This is how I'm going to live my life. During my drag career, I did a lot of discussions with BBC Free Speech, BBC News, obviously Muslim Drag Queens documentary on Channel 4, and I managed to break down a lot of barriers. And I took that step, obviously, of the entire world knowing about me. Forget me was my mum choosing to be a part of Muslim Drag Queens, choosing to be filmed, and also winning an award that year. I won the Attitude Pride Awards, and my mum came along and I dedicated that award to her in person. That was very freeing for me and my mother because everyone knew at that point. During my drag journey, I realized that I was transgender, and 5 years ago I began the process of medically transitioning. It caused my civil partnership to come to an end, but I'm happy, and my former partner is happy as well now. And since coming out as transgender, it hasn't affected my drag journey. I think the notion that you can be transgender and be a drag queen is cool. But I've also gone back to Pakistan. I've met up with, my relatives. I've also reconciled with that first cousin that I was going to marry at one point. And she's married to someone who loves her. She's got kids. She's happy. She's happy for me. And a lot of my family in Pakistan accept me. There are some sections that don't accept me, and that's absolutely fine. But I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy being open. Now, the reason why I'm telling you about myself is life for me at 38, it's been a roller coaster. And I don't feel it's ever going to stop, the roller coaster. As a person, I'm always going to be telling people about myself. I'm always going to be negotiating my identities in different spaces. And sometimes I will feel very shy. I'll be very challenged about, expressing myself in different spaces. But I've got to a point now where I've realized that I'm happy being me, and I want the world just to be themselves, whatever they believe, wherever they come from, whatever language they speak, whatever their gender is, whatever their sexuality is, whatever religion they belong to or not. I just want people to be happy being themselves, because I am. And it's taken me all this time. And at the same time, I know when I'm 68, who knows where I'll be. It's a ever evolving situation. As human beings, we should never be pressured to fit into certain boxes, or pressured not to be ourselves, or try different things. So I just want to take a moment to let that sit with you. And while you're thinking about it, I want you to get involved in this activity that I've come up with. Okay, grab a pen and paper. If you're doing this at home or anywhere else, you can even use your phone. Obviously, don't use your phone in the classroom, otherwise the teacher will come and get you. But take a moment to, at the top of the page, write your name. If you're watching this right now, I know ambassadors are, feel free to do this as well. Write your name at the top. Take a moment to look at your name, because essentially you're looking at yourself. Your name represents who you are. Look at the letters. Maybe say your name. Say the sound of your name. It might feel weird, I know, but just give it a go. Just give it a go. It's your name. There may be a story behind it. You might know the story of why that name was given to you. Now, underneath your name, write down the identities that you think you belong to. And whether this challenges you or whether you feel uncomfortable, that's okay. No one is here to judge. No one is here to say anything to you. This is your piece of paper. This is you. Okay? You can write down whatever. And it's up to you whether you want to share this with anyone. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can if you want to as well. Okay? So write down who you are, what identities you belong to, what communities you belong to, where you live. Believe it or not, where you live or where you were born says a lot about you. I live in South London, in a borough called Croydon. It's a very working class borough, but it's also the borough with the most youngest people in London. And I choose to live there because I love it. It's a mix of urban and suburban. And that says a lot about me, because I'm an urban girl, I'm a London girl, but I also like green spaces. So just like myself, try and think of, even if it feels uncomfortable, try and expand your mind and try and think of different things that you like, for example. So say, for example, you like shopping. Whether it's shopping for football gear, or whether it's shopping for the latest dresses, or whether it's online browsing, whatever. If you like shopping, try and break that down. What does that say about you? If you have a lot of money to spend, does that mean you're working class? Does that mean you're not working class? Try and expand without any judgment who you are. Me, really easy. It's taken me a while, but I've realized that I am British, Pakistani, South Asian, Muslim, queer, trans, and disabled. I was born into an immigrant Muslim working class family, and being a person who's gone to university and has a successful career, I now am middle class. Although my parents will argue that I will forever be working class, but there are certain lists that will say that I'm middle class, for example. I'm also a homeowner. So try and sit with that. Now take a look at the list you've created. Now that voice in your head is going to say all sorts of things. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, am I really that? Oh, I want to cross that out. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable, but don't put pressure on yourself. Okay? That voice in your head, it's not your best friend. It's a judgmental voice that we all have, you know? So just look at the list, go through the list. Now, there are some identities that sit really well with each other. Let me give you an example. South Asian, Pakistani, Muslim. Easy. They flow together for me. However, there's identities that have a lot of friction, a lot of clashing, right? So let me give you another example. British, Pakistani. Two very different cultures, two very different countries even. You know, different languages, different ways of living, different foods, different temperatures. I found a way to be British Pakistani, whether I'm in Britain, whether I go to Pakistan, or whether I fly around the world. So what I want you to do is just take a moment, really just to go through this list, and without any judgment, accept those identities. For the ones that cause friction, and you find that there's a struggle or a challenge there, that's okay. Just know that there's no time pressure. Also know that there's no ticking clock for you to figure this out. It's taken me up until 38 to figure out who I am, right? We're ever evolving. Who knows where I'm going to go later in life? But just know that there will come a time in your life where you will find the skills, or you will find avenues to negotiate or learn more about those identities. I only got comfortable with being Asian and loving Bollywood and Bhangra when I was in my late 20s, even though I grew up with it in my teenage years, being surrounded by Asian radio and Bollywood films on screen. I hated it at the time, but now I absolutely love it. So know that if you're looking at this list and you're finding challenges, know that there are many ways that you can gain support. Don't feel like you're on this on your own. I know a lot of people feel really isolated. So there's organizations out there that will support you, your teachers, your your community may be able to help you in many ways. Just know that life is a journey, and you will get to where you are meant to be, and you will get to be your authentic self one day. You just have to put in the work, and it's step by step without any pressure. That's the end of the activity. I hope you've gained something from this, and I hope it creates a great discussion in the classroom as well. I've been Asifa Lahore. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we're now going to go into question and answers.
Thank you so much for that masterclass. That was so inspiring, hearing about all the different things you've gone through and how accepting you are of yourself now. It's just amazing. Like you said, we're now going to lead on to the Q&A section. These questions have been submitted by pupils, but they're being read out by some of our Just Like Us ambassadors. And the first person we have up to ask a question is Newbie.
Hi, Asifa. Thank you so much for your insights. It's been super interesting. So, my question is, what advice would you give to a young person who's perhaps worried about how their faith community might react to them being LGBT+?
Thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you very much for taking the time for being here with us today. That's a great question, and I get asked that a lot of the time. I always answer that by saying that I am a very unique person, and my experiences are very unique to my life and my circumstances. I've got to a place now where my family are very, very accepting. Yes, there are parts of the family that aren't. But not every single South Asian or Pakistani or a faith family will be as accepting as mine, for example. What I would say to young people is there's a lot of pressure these days to come out, to belong to a label, whether it's the queer label, whether it's whatever label. And what I will say is, first decide whether you do want to come out. Coming out, yes, it's a privilege, and sometimes in some cases, coming out can actually be quite detrimental if not done at the right time or in the right way, especially coming from a faith and ethnic minority background. So first decide whether you do want to come out. There's no pressure to come out. You don't have to come out. You can still live a very queer life. And that may go against what I've said before about authenticity, but once you do come out, you can't take it back. So realize that to start with. Secondly, get yourself a support network. Look for people that are like you, that have been through the same experiences as you, or maybe are going through exactly the same experiences as you. And there's many sort of support services out there. Never feel like you have to go on this journey by yourself. There's many organizations just like us that really do provide support in that respect. And there's also specialist organizations that may help in terms of, specific communities coming out. And what I'll say is, don't feel like there's a time pressure. Don't feel like you have to come out at a certain age or that you're missing out. You have control over your process, and you have control over your story. So do what's right for you, do what's right with your family, and don't think that rejection or a lack of reconciliation is the only way. There's always a way. Sometimes it takes time. As queer people, or as any type of person that belongs to a community, you're always coming out. A Black woman, for example, entering a white space will always be coming out as Black. Till the day we die, we are always coming out. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Newbie. And yeah, it's just important to everyone coming out, if they are part of any religion, to know that it's not those two different parts of you. They don't, as exactly as you said, they don't have to conflict if you don't want them to. We now have another question from Alice.
Hi, Asifa. My question is, what advice would you give to young people about coping with negativity about their sexuality or identity from family, friends, or the public?
Thank you for a great question, Alice. I think, in the era of social media, in the era of the internet, I think young people in particular find it really hard to deal with negativity, because even if hate is not said verbally, it can be written online, it can be written on people's profiles, and I know a lot of young people really struggle dealing with hate. I'm very lucky in the sense that I was born in a period where there was no social media, so I know how to deal with negativity and hate. I just switch off or block. And I know a lot of people find that hard to do, especially young people, because that's where it's happening, right? You've got Snapchat, you've got Insta, you've got the world at your fingertips, and you can't communicate with your friends and everyone else without being online. But what I would say is, look, if you're dealing with negativity, whether it's online, whether it's in life, is don't feel like you have to go through it on your own, because I went through it on my own for 2 years. Ridiculous bullying, ridiculous negativity, and I know when I was at school things were really different. It was tough being gay, but what I'll say is, don't feel like you have to suffer it in silence. You are beautiful just the way you are, and even if you don't think you are right now, there will come a time where you will feel and believe that you're beautiful. You will make friends that you don't think you will make right now. Like there's so many more friends for you to make. There's so many more relationships for you to have. There's so many more um, pathways for you to go in life. You know, when I was at school, I used to think this is just life. This is my life right now, school. I couldn't see after. I couldn't see what was going to happen afterwards. But know that things will change and things will get better. Just don't allow yourself to fall into negative spaces. Talk to someone and reach out for support.
Thank you. That's really good advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also worth saying that on the Just Like Us website, there will be a bunch of links to different places that if you are struggling as a young person, people you can talk to, or different charities that you can talk to too. We now have a question from Gabriella.
Hi, Asifa. So my question is, what advice do you have for someone who may be struggling in figuring out what label fits them and the pressure around this?
Thank you, Gabriella. Like I said in my masterclass, I think there's a lot of pressure to fit into a certain label, or, you know, to fit into something that's really cool. You know, look, I mean, in my own journey, there was a time when I identified as a gay man. Now I live my life as a trans woman. And I never thought that would happen, or I never thought that I would get to be where I am. And the point is that as a young person, there's so much going on, right? There's so much going on scientifically in your body. There's so much going on in your mind. Things are changing. Life is changing around you, right? Each year, year 9, year 10, year 11, it's totally different to when you go to A levels and you go to year 12 and 13. Life is constantly changing. So never feel that you have to fit in. Try everything. You know, if you want to be part of a certain community or a certain label and it calls to you, go. Like, try and express it. Try and do it safely, obviously. But don't feel that just because you're part of that label, that label is going to be with you for the rest of your life. You know, but as human beings, we're always changing. You know, I mean, look, when I was 14, for example, there were so many girl bands, for example, that I liked. You know, I loved, there was this girl band called Vanilla, which was like really, really trashy. And I don't like them now. You know, there was a certain type of music I liked when I was young. I don't like that music now. So don't feel pressured to fit any label, but also take the time to express yourself and try labels if it works for you.
Thank you, that's great advice.
Thank you.
It's also definitely worth saying that just because, exactly as you said, you identify with one label one day doesn't mean you can't change it or try something else out another day. They're just there to serve you, labels. We now have another question from Rory whenever they're ready.
Hi, Asifa. Thank you very much for that. And I must say that you very much resemble and embody authenticity to me. And I hope I can look as fabulous as you when I'm 38.
I'm sure you will.
Let's hope. So my question for you is, what is a standout memory of feeling joy from being part of the LGBT plus community when you first came out?
Wow, what a question. It's really interesting, Rory, because when I first came out, there was a lot of pain, a lot of like questions, especially like to do with my family and stuff. And I felt really isolated from the community. I think that's something also I did to myself. I was like, okay, I'm gonna come out to my parents and I'm not gonna go out on the queer scene for like 3 months. That's something I did. I self-induced that, which was so silly at the time because I felt maybe I owed it to my parents that time, that, you know, I wanted to like slowly them getting used to it. So the best memory I have of the time when I came out was My best friend. So my best friend Claudia, who I live with, I met Claudia when we were both young men, met at secondary school. I was in the class above her, she was in the class below me. And the best memory I have of that time when I was coming out was just every day lying in bed on the phone with Claudia and just chatting about what was going on, what I was feeling. And although I didn't see her for 3 months, that really got me through that time. And um, it's a friendship that I've cherished all this time, and I know her now for 24 years. So, yeah, I think my best memory of coming out and, being part of something queer or part of the queer community was that friendship I have with my queer best friend, and how it's still such a strong friendship. And um, later, after that 3 month, self-imposed exile, if you like, when I did go back to the community, it was actually time to do Pride. So I remember going to Pride and feeling very happy about having this weight off my shoulders. My parents now know, and although it's challenging, it's I'm glad to be out. I'm glad to be here at Pride celebrating that.
I think when
Sorry, I
people
couldn't
worry
have more
about
of a fancier answer.
Thank you, Asifa. I think when people are worried about coming out, a lot of the time they're doing it, or they're worried because there's so many horror stories out there. But it's so great
Mm,
to hear such like amazing positive experiences, because there always are when you come out. There always are.
mm.
We now have a question from Celine.
Hi, Asifa. That was really inspirational. I absolutely adored listening to you. It resonates so much with me. I was just wondering, what would you say is like maybe a key thing that gave you the courage to actually come out sort of internationally? Because I know like you're supposedly like the first person to actually come out internationally who's also Asian slash Muslim. And yeah, I just wanted to know if there was something in particular that sort of gave you that courage.
Thank you, Celine. Pleasure to meet you. I just want you to know that Celine is one of my favorite names, so it's great talking to you
Oh,
today.
thank you.
Um, you're most welcome. It's a very good question, actually, because, you know, when I started doing drag, I basically was living a really good life. Like, I I was living a very celebratory life at that point. I'd come out, I had dealt with all my different identities. I had a great husband, I was on top of the world, I was in a good job. My parents knew about me. I wasn't stuck in a an arranged marriage, for example, that I would detest. But what I was doing was the reason why I decided to speak out about my story and the story of others was because the first year I started drag, I began hosting a South Asian LGBT Bollywood club night called Urban Desi, and I also opened up my own club night called Disco Rani, which means disco queen in Punjabi. And I would have so many people, whether it was young people, whether it was people in their early 20s or late teens, and older people in their 40s, for example. I would be there DJing, doing my shows, making sure everyone was having a good time. And at the same time, I'd be pulled in all sorts of directions, and I would be having to sort of do therapy sessions with people, people who were stuck in marriages that they did not want to be part of, that they were forced into, people living really double lives, where, in the club they were out and proud and they were loving it, but the moment they went home, they led a whole different life. I got privy to, people that would never come back, or I'd never see again. And that was because they were sort of turning their back on their gay self, or in the extreme situations, there were a couple of times where, you know, I would hear that such and such person has been killed, or, you know, honor killings are still a big deal. Um, and so I'll be totally honest with you, Celine. I got to a point where I was like, either I don't do anything about this and stay quiet and enjoy the business side of drag. It's great money. All these people are coming in. I'm making great money. My career's going well. Or I can actually decide to put my head above the parapet, and do something about this, because it's I'm not the first. I know I'm not the first Muslim queer person. I know I'm not the first Muslim drag queen ever to be in the UK. There's been many more before me. The only thing that makes me different is I decided to put my head above the parapet, become the first out Muslim drag queen that the UK has ever had, and become a person to talk about all these issues very publicly. And when I started, it was like very tough. 2012 to 2015 were really tough for me personally, because of all the exposure and all the challenging questions and debates that I was having. But I'm glad I've done that, because 2021, there's so many more queer people of color out there on social media talking about it, in real life talking about it. I think, there's so many more ethnic minorities being comfortable with being ethnic, the rise of Black Lives Matter, and just people just, I find that people are much more open about who they are now. And I'd like to think I've done something small, in pushing that along. I know there's a lot of work to be done still, but at least people now know that you can be who you are, despite whatever challenges or obstacles are put in your way. So that's why I decided to go international, as you put it, Celine.
Love it. I agree. I think you definitely have had an impact, and you're giving me goosebumps. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, like Celine, I can only imagine how many people you have like both directly and indirectly impacted in a positive way because of you coming out. So it's just amazing. And we have one more question today, and this is from D.
Hi, hey, first of all, I really wanted to thank you for this amazing talk, and coming from mixed background myself, it's people like you that really, really inspire me and help me to, keep on being myself and trying to, come to terms with it. But I'm gonna ask you a question that will be on a lighter side. So I'm really interested in your career. So I wanted to ask you, how do you feel your identity has impacted your music career and your artistic expression?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dee. I mean, because of who I am, life is tough. It has been tough, and I'm sure it will continue to be tough. But sometimes I forget I'm just an entertainer. I'm just someone who performs, and I love to make people laugh. I love to, put music out, produce my own music. And I think how life has, in order to answer your question, I write and produce shows and songs about my own experiences. And I choose not to, I choose all my identities to be involved in that, if appropriate. So, for example, I produce music that that isn't just Bollywood, for example. I might take Bollywood strings and Bollywood drums and put them with house beats and EDM chords and things like that, and take inspiration from Gladys Knight and really have a belter of a club banging track, for example. I'm very also wary that 14 to 16-year-olds probably won't know who Gladys Knight is, but check her out online. She's a fabulous singer. But yeah, no, in terms of my music, in terms of my creativity, I try and incorporate all of my identities into it, whether it's appropriate, whether say if I'm doing a song, does this song need any Asian elements? Does it need any, or is it a full-on Brit pop rock anthem, whatever? I try and experiment a lot, and again, that goes with my visuals as well. I love mixing Eastern fashion with Western fashion. I love mixing different silhouettes. I come from a background that loves modest fashion, and I love mixing Western silhouettes with modest fashion as well. So that's just a taste of how I bring all my different identities into my art and creativity. And I love the fact that I can do that because, um, it's better to be diverse, I think, than expected and bland.
Thank you. Thank you. You're amazing.
So are you. Thank you. What a great question.
Well, that is all the questions we have time for today for our Q&A. But Asifa, on behalf of everyone watching today and also all the people watching this for School Diversity Week, I just want to say thank you so much. If you're watching this for School Diversity Week and you want to find any of the other masterclasses that we've been doing, you can find that on our Just Like Us website, www.justlikeus.org/masterclasses. And again, if you want any advice on how to interact with our content safely and anonymously, if you need it, you can find it on our page, www.justlikeus.org/betteronline. And if you want to follow Just Like Us on any of our social media, we are at Just Like Us UK on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And similarly, if you want to find Asifa on any social media, she is at Asifa Lahore on Instagram and Twitter. The only thing I've left to say is thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again soon.